Man is by nature religious, says C.G. Jung in one of his reflections. This religious impetus and striving in us used to be directed and projected into the idea of God. God, whether as a source or manifestation of wonder, as a legitimization for rational and moral conduct, or as a causal entity filling in the gaps of natural science. In the secular world, the religious instinct finds its expression in our law for the nation, in communal values to the greater than individual shortcomings, and perhaps even in the idea of culture or civilization elevating the human condition to new heights. Yet more recently, we see the rise of a new object of worship, the self. The self as subject perceives the self as object in self-consciousness, as the new placeholder for our religious striving. We become the object of our longing for something greater than ourselves. What appears like a contradiction in terms might be redeemed through a medium that can elevate the self as object to the realm of ends. If it's true, as Aristotle says, that happiness lies in the realization of man's potential, then it's questionable that we see men specializing in fragmenting their own being, rather than having the courage to stand up, fulfill their potential, through allowing their different abilities and traits to shine through. The artist is someone who stays true to this vision of Schiller's, in the sense in which he resists specialization. He's defined by his connection to other things, by his connection to nature, by his connection to skill, through ability, through poetry, and philosophy. Things which are becoming disconnected and which leave behind a landscape whose holistic nature is disregarded by modernity.
Lines drawn across fields and moors, a membrane of brambles, blackberry blood on razor wire. Only the darting hair creeps the interstices. Dot to line, dot to line. This is the metronome, in the click of a propelling pencil. Lines drawn across deserts and seas, lines of soldiers, lines that hold the wail of a father, clutching the bones of a love. These lines are drawn in crayon by a child. Lines of toy cars, lines of Lego, lines around eyes and heads and fingers and tiny bodies. All our faintest scents and moods cut up, reconfigured. Fish have no respect. They swim through, color outside the lines like lazy children. But we are hooked, all of us, writing the binary, hanging ourselves with lines we drew because it was all too big. Words were too few to say. The air we breathed, I breathed. Air from your lungs, your blood. Air to say love and leave me alone. That air was mine too. And the birds and the frozen grass outside. And we are intimate, conjoined, a murmuration. Held a breath apart, drawing and ghosting the separation.
So Alan, you've painted a lot of self-portraits so far in your career. What are you trying to express with them?
Well, I mean, I didn't set out to really to express anything, to be honest. I just started doing it. And I think I did my first when I was about 14, 15. And I just sort of fell into doing these really as sort of between project paintings, you know.
But at the same time, painting is your vocation, but also your profession. So where do you think the self-portrait fits in your work, and where do you think the self-portrait fits in the market more larger?
I'm not sure it does. I mean, I don't think it does. I mean, I wouldn't really expect anybody to want to buy any of these paintings. I don't really do it for that. But I mean, I don't think any artist, you can't really get into any of this, with that view, because it's ridiculous. It's much easier ways of making money. It's not for that. I mean, obviously, it's nice to make a living from doing the thing you love to do, but you can't sort of direct your aim towards that. You just do the things that you want to do, and then you hope maybe somebody will appreciate or understand what you're doing. But in terms of role, I mean, there's no sort of utility into it. You have this distance, and you look back at yourself, and you see all your self-portraits from over the years, and you see how physically you've changed, and you see times when you're obviously happier and times when you were sadder, because of these forces that, beyond your control. And then, here, sort of, this is my neighborhood, painting here in the woods. I'm up here most days. And, I mean, there's these anthills everywhere. And this is quite a little one. But you see these, look at these ants, and I just think, what's the private life of these guys? There's millions of them, and they're all incredibly industrious. Clearly have some kind of, I don't know, private teleology. It might not be the way we have it. It might not think in the way that we're thinking, but they're certainly busy. And from outside, it seems a very sort of barren and absurd world, really. But perhaps that's not dissimilar to what we are. I mean, there's huge cities, from an outside place, and it's probably quite absurd too. I don't know. So I don't think I've really answered your question at all. But I don't really worry about it. I just paint things. I think the thing to do is to go and paint things that move you. And I imagine one interesting feature for you painting a self-portrait of yourself is that we're trying to understand is part of who you are, part of what defines you, what's your essence. And there are people in philosophy who'd argue that if you come to see your essence, if you come to look yourself in the face, it changes you in the process. What do you think of that? I mean, certainly, I'm not sure I completely agree with this idea of essence. I don't really know if there's a clear thing. I mean, I'm not sure I can identify. Yeah, I mean, obviously, it's me that goes and makes the painting, so, I take up a certain amount of space, so I get that. But the idea of a sort of personal identity thing, I think that's a really much more fluid thing, more of it in a state of flux. I think it changes a lot over your lifetime. I don't really see very much in common with a young, 19-year-old Alan than I do with my current Alan. I mean, obviously, we're connected by we did this stuff, and I'm accountable for those things, but I don't necessarily have very much in common. Like, values may have changed, my politics may have changed, lots of things have changed. But I think, your question is leading to the. Your question is whether the actual action, the act of painting, changes this thing itself. You're changed by it. Is that? Yeah, I think I'm interested in this moment of trying to. I mean, say you're trying to capture something melancholic about yourself, and so that particular portrait might have that feature emphasized. And so say that you capture that thing, and so you have this structural resemblance between the painting and the mood and the self, the who you are. And so I'm interested in how permanent that sort of structural feature is, and whether there's this way in which, if we realize who we are in that particular moment, we somehow overcome it. There are
There are two big things that happen that I'm aware of in the process of painting a self-portrait. Well, three perhaps, if we include time and the process of time. The first is we learn the lesson of interconnection. And I've talked about this before already. But we have this sense of the interdependency of the color values on each other. And that it's not possible to decide any one in isolation. That's a very powerful philosophical and spiritual lesson that one learns about oneself and one's connection to the world one lives in. And the second is that over a period of time, one faces one's own aging. One sees oneself fading before one's eyes over a period of time. And one has to face up to the quite clear horror of this, that behind this there is the shadow of eventual death. And facing this mortality, can precipitate a sort of crisis of sorts. But if we can maintain discipline and keep working on it, there is also the notion, we've loosely called this beauty, that through the process of it, one does see rhythms which one has seen in nature, which are very beautiful, and shifts in colour. And it might be a moment where the sky clouds over and there is a warm light directed onto a passage which one has not seen before, and there will be an indescribable feeling of joy. And this, in a sense, can transfigure the sort of crisis that one might also be having at the same time of viewing oneself over a long period of time. So these are certain lessons that one. So if we look at this through the lens of meditation, then clearly one does change. Oneself is not the same at the end of it. We go into this perhaps more naive and come out with it a touch wiser, but also exalted at the beauty in the process and a sense of connection to the world. So I think this is the change that takes place.
Technology leads to an increase in the change of velocity over the change of time. This is what most laws like Moore's law and Metcalfe's law are predicting. But change in velocity over change in time is defined as acceleration. As such, technology leads to a constant increase in acceleration. Furthermore, most models predict this acceleration to be exponential. If we now think of this acceleration as something transcendental, as something that comes to structure the way we relate to ourselves and to life, then we are confronted with the question whether the aesthetics of modern temporality are in agreement with the aesthetics of art. Painting a self-portrait is a laborious and time-consuming activity, and it is not clear whether this exercise is rewarded in a world whose understanding of durability is changing. We are interested in the new, not the durable. The temporality of the painter and his work is fundamentally different to the temporality of those who exhaust themselves in quick pleasures and more powerful and faster technological devices. But where does the painter and his aesthetics fit in a world that is constantly accelerating? Only art seems able to bridge that conflict. The soil of our age could prove very fertile for the self-portrait as a mode of expression. In the self-portrait, the self is displayed in its actual new role. It is romanticized and takes on a new meaning, worthy of our worship.